Kabasubata majaladi, akala kama masasi kwa mama kabasu, sisi kabasu, ito kabasu. Hati zombie kabasina tani karata, hati zombie kabasina tani karata. Wekangu na wena unkangu, wekangu na wena unkangu. We are dongo na kabasu, we are kabasu ya lale. We are dongo na kabasu, we are kabasu ya lale. Wekangu na wena unkangu, wekangu na wena unkangu. We are dongo na kabasu, we are kabasu ya lale. We are dongo na kabasu, we are kabasu ya lale. Yelina lale mijudu na kani kabasu zamane, asani kamani nazura babeletanina, beletanina de, azuru wasa, beletanina de, azu diktorat, reise jokera, reise salvaki, luluwe, 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 luluwe. Luluwe kangu, luluwe na uya na unkangu, luluwe kangu, luluwe na uya na unkangu. We are dongo na kabasu, we are kabasu ya lale. We are dongo na kabasu, we are kabasu ya lale. Luluwe kangu, luluwe na uya na unkangu, luluwe kangu, luluwe na uya na unkangu. We are dongo na kabasu, we are kabasu ya lale. We are dongo na kabasu, we are kabasu ya lale. Kirita, Alita, Kurita. Kirita, Alita, Kurita. Kirita, Alita, Kurita. Kurita, Alita, Kurita. Kirita, Alita, Kurita. Kirita, Alita, Kurita. Kirita, Alita, Kurita. Kurita, Alita, Kurita. Elina nali mijudu na tani kabasu zamane, asani kamani nazura babeletanina, beletanina de, azuru wasa, beletanina de, azu diktorat, reise jokera, reise salvaki, luluwe, 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 luluwe. Luluwe kangu, luluwe na uya na unkangu, luluwe kangu, luluwe na uya na unkangu. We are dongo na kabasu, we are kabasu ya lale. We are dongo na kabasu, we are kabasu ya lale. Luluwe kangu, luluwe na uya na unkangu, luluwe kangu, luluwe na uya na unkangu. We are dongo na kabasu, we are kabasu ya lale. Kabasu baba majaladi, ajala kama masasi kwa mama kabasu. Sita kabasu, kito kabasu. Zombie kabasina tane, mara. Zombie kabasina tane, mara. Weka luluwe na uya na unkango. Weka luluwe na uya na unkango. We are dongo na kabasusa, we are kabasu yalale. We are dongo na kabasusa, we are kabasu yalale. Weka luluwe na uya na unkango. Weka luluwe na uya na unkango. We are dongo na kabasusa, we are kabasu yalale. We are dongo na kabasusa, we are kabasu yalale. Senator Barbeni kabasina. Kiram people, John Karanji, Pusipi, Pusalamu, Salva Kitre, Salgovi, Mapizol be Kabasina, Kelina Lingita, Sawa, Mapizol be Adelena. Weka, Luluena, we are Unkamu. We are Dongola Kabasusa, we are Kabasianale. We are Dongola Kabasusa, we are Kabasianale.
Isaac? I think we should start. Yeah, we should start. Yeah, all our most of our speakers are here. Remain DengDit Ayok and Usad Rajab Mohandis. I mean, Usas Edmund Yakani, but Edmund Yakani supposed to join us in studio, but I don't know if he will come or not. So those two gentlemen will get us on the way. So let us start the show.
All right, thank you so much. I yield back microphone to co-host Manon as well. Welcome everybody. Ustaz Mohandis Rajab, welcome on board. Thank you for being with us here as well. Ustaz Kunjuk, Ustaz Sabata, and Ustaz Mayendit. You are all welcome and to this very crucial topic. We will come and brainstorm and we'll talk about it. Thank you. I yield back mic to you, Madid, to control the room. Thank you.
Thank you, Isaac. Appreciate it. So let me welcome my my special guests. For those of you just raise your hand, please. We will give you a chance later, but this time I have a special guest that I invited for this topic, which has Rajab Mohandis and Comrade Manon and Mulana Mayen DengDit, and also Usas DengDit Ayok will be here soon, and also Usas Edmund Yakani. So, but those are the 5 gentlemen that I invited for this important show. The topic of today, who own the land of South Sudan. As we know that for the last week or so, there has been a lot of debating in social media because of the land policy that the government passed, that the land is to be for the people. This is the topic of today. I have these 4 gentlemen right now. They will start talk about the land because we need to know what benefit of the land, how important it is for the South Sudan. So, and we know that what land issues has been a lot of problem in South Sudan. It's a part of the issue that people of South Sudan have been talking about. So we will be going through illegal issues and all kind of debate how people interact about the recent law that has been passed. So that is we will dwell on those and see how you disagree and agree with the recent law that has been passed. So that is our topic of today. Let me start by welcome everybody. Those of you who are listening up down here, so welcome. Share the room. This show is live on Facebook, YouTube, and also in Twitter. For those of people who don't have access to Clubhouse, they were listening in. So we thought that this is the important show. We should put it on live so people can listen and can remain as a record. So later on, the people who don't have access to it, they can have. Another thing too, I would like to add for those of you listening here, all of these topics that we come up with, they benefit for our people, and also to the government is listening to you what you're talking about. So make sure that let us keep that in mind. And third, the housekeeping rule. So housekeeping rule, please do not insult one another. If you come up here, please stick to the topic. So if you see one of your friend or colleague that have grudges with you, please do not bring in this room. So this room is recognized as professional. So choose your word wisely. If you disagree with your colleague, your friend, please choose your words wisely how you disagree with that person. So let us respect one another. Those are simple rules of this media. So I think I make everything clear. So I will start beginning to welcome Ustaz Manon Aleo, Ustaz Rajab Mohandis, Mulana Mayen DengDit, and Sabata and Kunjok and Peter. Welcome to the show. Let me start with the Manon. If you are there, I can give my group back to you, and then introduce yourself 1 to 2 minutes, and then move to Rajab and Mayan, and then we'll start the discussion. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you, Madit, again, and thank for the rest of the colleagues who are in the panels, and the people that came to attend the public debate, which is the land, who own the land in South Sudan. And thank also go to the South Sudan Eagle Media for putting attention to this important subject for the whole South Sudanese, because the land is so crucial, and the land value always, when the land become more valuable, it become even more important for everyone. In human history, we are connected to the land, and we cannot live without land. And that is the significance of attention of this debate tonight. So for those who don't know me, my name is Manon Jokaleu. I'm representative of the SPLM in the US, and I live in New York. But I do travel to South Sudan at least twice a year. You know, I'm interested in agriculture, microeconomics, you know, small scale farm. I'm one of the people that actually interested in encouraging diaspora to go back home and start establishing the retirement plans in South Sudan, which is the agriculture projects. You know, this is one of my interest area. I'm interested also in politics, but I believe that politics of South Sudan is more into stability and self-sufficiency. We need to have good politicians. And we think to be a good politician, as we debate the whole about corruption, we have to invest in ourselves, and we have to ensure that we have resource, we have our own self-sufficient income. That's the only way we can be able to promote transparency and accountability in the country. As late Dr. Jones say, the poor people because we want something good for ourselves, then we have to work hard for it. And thank you. I yield back to you.
Thank you so much, Comrade Manon. The lines will go on. Starts Mohandis, 2 minutes for you to wrap up, to greet.
Thank you very much for the opportunity and for organizing this. And I'm happy to join in this conversation. My greetings to all the panelists and moderators and fellow citizens who are participating in this conversation in the audience. Of course, I am Rajab Mohandis, and I've been with the civil society, a very concerned citizen, and actively engaging in the situation in South Sudan in a bid to find a lasting solution to the situation. Thank you.
On this issue. Thank you for having me again. Be one of these distinguished list of panelists.
Thank you. Thank you, Mulana Mayen. So let me welcome Sabata. Fadal.
Thank you very much for also welcoming me to the room. My name is Sabata Ramba. I am an activist. I run an advocacy foundation called the Equatorial Advocacy Foundation. It is tailored to improve socio-economical and socio-cultural by act of or through practice of socio-political activities, the well-being of fellow Equatorians and improve their activities amongst the people of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Usas Sabata. Kunjok Fadal.
Greetings to everybody, and thank you, South Sudan Eagle Media. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I also appreciate the topic as a very important topic. My name is Atem Kunjok. Christian name is Martino, and I am currently in Canada. A high school teacher, that's my profession. I hold Bachelor of Philosophy and Religious Studies, double major. I also hold a Bachelor of Education, both from University of Regina, Saskatchewan, where I am residing. I've been in Canada for 22 years. I go to South Sudan often. So I'm interested to hear from other. I'm not an expert nor a politician, but Mandela once said that if you are born in South Africa, you're born in South Africa, and you are a black or African, then you become a politician by nature. Therefore, the fact that I'm a South Sudanese always make me think of putting my 2 cents in every discussion. Thank you again for the opportunity, and I would like to listen to these great panelists and the people listening down there. Greetings to you, and if without you, the discussion will be worthless. So thank you so much for the opportunity. I yield back the mic.
Thank you, Usal Kunjok. First of all, thank you to have you in the room. Usal Peter. James Podol.
Okay, thank you. I hope you guys hear me.
Yes, you are there.
Okay, yeah, my name is Peter Rock. I do reside in the state of Minnesota. I am a member of Sudan National Secretariat and the leadership of Brother Manon. And also in terms of educational wise, I hold 2 masters. One of them biochemistry and molecular biology, and the other one in healthcare administration. The healthcare administration, I got it from Clarkson College. I graduated from University of Nebraska at Omaha as major in biotechnology, and then I went to Georgetown to do the Master of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology, and also I'm excuse me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, and also I'm aspiring, medical student. I did apply, and hopefully I will start next year. And professional-wise, I work for Mayo Clinic. I'm a technical specialist in the forensic and toxicology lab at Mayo Clinic. That's my profession. Here at headquarters, as some of you know that there's 3 Mayo Clinic hospital. The main one here in Rochester, Minnesota, where I work, is the headquarters. The other one in Jacksonville, and the other one in Arizona. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sir Peter. My last speaker, with the honor speaker, with the rest of my 5 speakers, is DengDit Ayok. Thank you for joining us. This is the just introduction. So this is the channel. So introduce yourself to 1 to 2 minutes, and then we will dive in our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brother Madid Mayak of South Sudan Eagle Media, for the invitation to come and speak about the issue of them. I greet you and I greet the rest of the panelists, Mr. Manon, Mr. Mohandis, Mr. Mayen, Sabata, Peter, and Kunjok, and all the listeners. My name is DengDit Ayok. I am a chairman of the United Citizens for Change, a political movement that is working to realize change for our people in the Republic of South Sudan. It is an honor to be invited to speak about this vital subject. I am humbled and honored. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much, Usas DengDit, for joining us, and I real delight. And thanks 5 of you for accepting my invitation to talk about this important subject topic of today. So let me start with Manon. The simple question is regarding about the land policy, as which one of you had already have the document with you. So the question of today, who owns the land of South Sudan? A, is it the government? B, is it the community? C, is the people, or private? So these are the things that we need to discuss today and highlight all of this. And we can see, you guys can talk, especially Mulana Mayandi will talk legal procedures on this. Let us start from 5 to 10 minutes, and then we move on. And the rest of the people who join us that don't have green, we will come after you, after these 5 or 4 speakers, they already speak, and then we can come to you. So let me start with Manon. Manon Padal.
Okay, thank you again, Saz Madit, and thank my colleague also, all of you. And welcome back to Saz DengDit Ayok. It's been a long time. It's been out from Clubhouse, absent. And my greeting to all South Sudanese who are attending this debate tonight. And it is very important for us for the public consumption after the draft that is drafted by Ministry of Lands in South Sudan, Physical and Infrastructure and Land, drafted the National Land Policy. And I think South Sudan needed, and it's go back before 2013, the draft that actually how to put our frameworks for the South Sudan land policy. But due to the crisis of 2013, it was disrupted, and they did not continue to work on that draft. But I think draft took a couple of years that they are working on it with the support of international organizations such as the United Nations and IGAD and African Union, FAO, World Food Program, and different international organizations that actually work with South Sudanese task force in order to put the land policy together. And I think they conducted a few workshops in Juba and Wow regarding the participation of the public or stakeholders, which is a civil society and traditional authority and a representative of the expertise on the land use and land policy across the country, plus 3 administration area. And I believe South Sudan, the issue of land is one of the vital, even during the CPA 2005, was one of the argument in negotiation, because the question was, Khartoum was interested in resource in South Sudan, and possibility of South Sudan to succeed was not really guaranteed, and how the resource in South Sudan can be protected. And I think the SPLM came with a proposal of land belong to community, as well as the resource that above the land owned by the community. And I think this was the argument to protect the resource of South Sudanese people. After the independence of 2011, the South Sudan transitional constitution amended came to Article 1701 in 2011, amended the land policy at national level to declare that all land in South Sudan is owned by the people of South Sudan, and its usage shall be regulated by the government according to with the provision of this constitution and the law. Well, if you go back to Land Act 2009, it stated that the land is belong to community, and the resource that over land are owned by the community. So here, when the new policy proposal came out recently, and was approved by the Council of Ministers of Transitional National Unity, because if you look into ARCES, there are 10 institutions that actually propose in ARCES that need reform. And one of them is land institution or land policy. Therefore, it is necessary for the current transitional government to make a review and make reform on the land policy. And the reason are obvious why we need to reform the land policy, because we have many challenges. Actually, all of us,
as the South Sudanese, we are aware about it. Whether the issue of land grabbing across the country has become debate in clubhouse here, and the challenges of returnees, whether from North Sudan or from refugees, those who has been displaced, or even internal displaced South Sudanese, whether through the insecurity in the country or natural disaster. It became a challenge for the government, because it is an obligation for the government of today to accommodate the South Sudanese people. And I think challenges also of people, returnees, from whether from refugees came, or whether from South Sudan, or whether the internal displaced, people actually decide to settle in urban areas, which is the city, whether in 10 state capitals and the capital of 3 administrative area, and whether in the capital of the South Sudan, which is the Juba. People want to settle on the urban. And in our constitution also, there's freedom of the movement. People have a right to move wherever they want to move. Is a universal right. You can choose where you want to live. Government cannot dictate where people should use to live. But if everybody have a right to live wherever, according to freedom of universal movement, then the government also have obligation to have a proper way of settlement, of accommodating those South Sudanese people. And it's become a problem. Therefore, if you look into those problems, count on the lack of consensus on who owns the land, which is the question of today that we are discussing. So they want to define who owns the land, because it became a confusion. If the land belongs to communities, how we define the community who own the land, and how you regulate it. Yes, we have customary laws, but does customary laws actually going to respect the right of South Sudanese people as a citizen of the country to access the land? Maybe some communities have a certain customary law that may not even recognize even right of others, colleagues or other citizens in the country. Therefore, there should be universal law that actually protect the land and the right of South Sudanese to accessibility into land across the country without being discriminated, whether gender-based or whether ethnic background. As long as they are South Sudanese, they should have a right to access into a land and settlement. Weak land administration and management is one of the problems. There is no proper management, and there's no proper administration that manages the land. Displacement, I stated earlier, which is created by disaster and conflict, become a problem, and government need to settle those communities and or accommodate them. Gender bias or discrimination against the gender, because most of our culture, most of our communities of 64 ethnic group across the line, we don't give the right of the women when it comes to ownership of the land. And the land is currency, land is value, land is money. How can you discriminate a big portion of society, which is actually is majority in the country? The gender, the women are majority in the country. There's no debate about it. They could make over 60%, where the male is making under 40 or 40% maybe. So you cannot ignore that size of population, and they are citizens. When it comes to traditional customary law, they can be discriminated. And the land laws, which is national land policy, need to address that problem. You know, issue of agriculture and sustainability of management of land based on resources that we have. South Sudan now is facing challenges of the food challenges. And the reason we are not able to cultivate, even if we make excuses that because of security in the country, is go back to land policy, because security is there and people need to eat. Security will not stop people to eat. And if security will not stop people to eat, then people will be able to cultivate. Even within this severe security, people are still have to cultivate it, because they have to make a food for themselves. and it's hurting our economy. And that's why the dollar is skying, because we don't produce food in South Sudan. Nevertheless, we have over 33 million hectares, which is actually land that can be used for agriculture project activity. Well, only 4% that we utilize. And if we can make it to 10%, even 15%, I think South Sudan will have a self-sufficient of the food. And how that can happen without clear regulation of the land policy in the country. So people can be able, South Sudanese who want to cultivate, who want actually to produce food and in the country, can be able to access the land without the clear land policy. I think those are the things that land need to address, new land policy. The land use planning also is one of the management and environmental conservation is one of the challenge also. You have to manage, we cannot just do it, develop the urban expansion without using the modernized way of the planning aspect in terms of land use policy. You have to have a proper way of planning. It is not just about settlement. It is also about preserving the environment within the city itself. So those things need to be utilized. Informal settlement, which is a problem, especially in big cities like capital cities like in Juba, people just go and settle anyhow, and also some security or generals or individuals or even chiefs utilize their power and just settle people for the benefit of gaining the money. And those places may be land that is belong to some of communities that actually being affected because of this type of settlement, that actually this unorganized settlement actually is one of the problems. The other issue need to be addressed, which the debate here in Clubhouse, is a movement of the cattle keepers, the post-petroleum community. Post-petroleum community, they are South Sudanese, and they should have a proper way of how they can move around in the country, and the grazing land need to be identified. What are the area? What are the point? What are the point that they should stop in? What are the area they should immigrate in? And whether it's going to be a seasonal or a permanent settlement is a South Sudanese, and livestock also is one of can be a backbone for our economy in South Sudan. So you need to find a way how you regulate these policies, because we know we have traditional customer law that regulate those cattle grazing land policy. But we have seen early, even within one community like Yen community, how many fighting community in early days, in 80s and 70s. People fight over grazing land with the same community who own it. For ownership, they fight over it. So those things government have to regulate it, because if the government regulate those areas and ensure defining those areas, it will reduce the conflict. Will reduce the conflict between cattle keepers and also the farmers. So when we debate here in Clubhouse, those are the things that also they want to address it through the land policy. Land grabbing and illegal land occupation is a big problems, in the country. It cannot be addressed without a national land policy. A national land policy have to address that, because it creates conflict, it creates problems, and have to be criminalized in the country by the law. So people now will have no excuse of using other tools to grab the land legally. Dispute over internal boundaries or even international boundaries in the country. We have witnesses. We have witnesses conflict even between communities for the internal boundaries. Without a clear land policy, without a clear way of demarcation of internal boundaries, which are administrative boundaries, I think we will create the problem within it's already created some conflict within the country. And then climate change, natural disaster in the country is something also need to be addressed. So here, the question, who own the land? in the country, I think is appropriately defined in Article 17 in our Constitution. 1, which is the whole land of South Sudan belongs to the people of South Sudan and owned by the people of South Sudan and should be regulated by the government. At the same time, it is clear that this land also is categorized by the categories, which is private, public, and community. It has not taken away the community right to access to the land. It has not taken away the community right to access the land, but there will be a community act, land act policy, which is actually will accommodate the customs law, but it have to accommodate in the way that those some customer law that discriminate per se, will not be allowed, because we have to go under constitution of our country. When we come to the rule and regulation in the country, I think Molana Mayen will speak later on about it. We cannot put a law that will discriminate the citizen in the country. You know, therefore, it is so important that the land need to be explained to the public. When we say land act, community land act, it have to explain the laws that have to be a match with our constitution, and it should not discriminate the citizen in the country. It should treat citizens equally in the country, because freedom of movement is there. South Sudanese are free to move wherever they want to move, regulated by the law, and they can settle where they want to settle in the country. So here, those acts will follow, including even the Women Land Act, because of the right of women to access is being proposed. Is that I will not prolong. I will leave the rest to our colleague, because I'm going to have another chance to interact with my colleague here. But what I'm saying here, we should not take it politically, because I see people are taking it politically. But we should debate the land in the way that should benefit all of us as South Sudanese, and it should not discriminate us. This is the bottom line. And the only way that land cannot be discriminate us as a citizen, to treat certain citizen in a certain way, like certain citizen, the land owners, and certain citizen cannot access because the other citizen are owners. It doesn't really work in that way, and it doesn't treat us in one nation. So having one comprehensive land policy that accommodate all of us and answer all of us, and erase any law, whether it's customary law or whatever, that will discriminate on the basis of being or ethnic or religious or whatever, those laws should not be allowed to be practiced anymore if they are there. Especially the issue of the gender access to right to land is so important for the women. They are majority in the country, and I don't think community customary law will treat women, because we know each community have different way of treating, of regulating the land in their own way. And this is exactly what needs to be addressed in this policy, comprehensive law that will accommodate all South Sudanese without discrimination. And thank you, Ayok.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you, Manon. Our next speaker is
Rajab. Thank you once again, Chief Madid, for the opportunity, and thank you, Manon, for your submission. Now, I want to start with some assumptions based on my experiences engaging on these platforms, that I'm very much aware of very strong views and positions already taken about the current draft national land bill that has been passed by the National Parliament, Cabinet or Council of Ministers. And I come to this platform with an open mind, and I invite all of us to do so. Come with open minds to contribute and learn from this conversation. I also make the assumption that the debate, in my view, is a solution-seeking public discourse, not a confrontational exercise to sort out our entrenched beliefs and positions on some of these national matters. And that we present this from independent positions or as individuals. And I know that whenever we engage in such conversations, by the end of the conversation, you get attacked, either as a government or government supporter, or as an opposition, or whichever someone feels is not in line with their positions or beliefs. And so our participation and my participation in person in this conversation derives no personal benefits, and so it is a free contribution to our national issues as a citizen, and in that case as an active citizen. Now, my approach to this question, I'm sure we may be just as long as the one for Manon, is that I try to look at it in terms of the historical context of how we got to where we are with the issue of the land and the land ownership. This is drawn from a scientific approach where you're familiar with the formula that are used in some in science, in mathematics, in physics, chemistry, and the rest. These formula are derived from what we call past principles or definitions. And when you get to use this formula to address a problem and you find it difficult, you get lost, you may actually leave the formula and go to the first principles, to the definitions of where this formula was derived from. And that approach would help you get to the solution. So that's the approach I'm using to get to the answer of this issue. So I borrow heavily from the land policy itself. I like the detailed context analysis that they provided. And on that note, first they said the history of South Sudan has been in many ways shaped by struggles over control of its land and natural resources. That has been a very important aspect, I believe, and that land has been managed under customary law for most of the history of our people. And that is what I will explain. I was looking at some documents, and one document, a research document by what they call a project called South Sudan Rural Land Governance Project, issued in 2011 and then amended in or revised in 2012, says that 75% of the land of South Sudan remains under customary law and owned, used, and managed by local communities. Now, in the historical context, and especially borrowing from the National Land Act, I mean the current land bill, in 1906, and these are land policies in historical perspective of where we got here. In 1906, there was the land ordinance enacted by the Anglo-Egyptian regime in the colonial time. And what did it say? It declared that all land in the Sudan is the property of the government and was only enforced and was the property of the government. Now, this land ordinance was not successfully implemented because many people, and especially the people of South Sudan, rejected it in totality. And so it was enforced in few towns in the north, and it was not successful. In 1925, the colonial government enacted another law called the Land Settlement and Registration Ordinance. And this ordinance declared the land in the Sudan to be disputed. That land is disputed, and requiring anyone claiming title to any land to submit a claim for settlement and registration. This too had very limited impact. It wasn't successfully implemented, meaning that land has been a problem in the history of our people. Then, in 1928, 3 years after this previous one, the colonial administration also enacted what they call, or I don't know whether they were enacting or just simply issuing also, but they issued something called Prescription and Limitation Ordinance, which provided that anyone who had occupied a piece of land uninterrupted for a period of 10 or more years became entitled to the land by prescription and by limitation. Again, implementation of this was very difficult because, first of all, this colonial administration was a very small group, largely based in the urban centers and mostly in the north. And so they had very difficult time to spread all over the country and enforce some of these policies, which was not understood by our own people who had ownership of the land where they were living. And then came 1970, which was now after independence. There was what they call Unregistered Land Act. The Unregistered Land Act provided that any land not registered in accordance with the provisions of the 1925 Land Settlement and Registration Ordinance, the previous one that I just talked about, was deemed to belong to the government of Sudan. And by that, if you heard what I said earlier, that over 75% of the land of South Sudan, and actually much more, if we take the whole of Sudan at that time, was owned by communities. It means technically the government had taken over the ownership of the entire country, the land in the entire country, because most of the land was not registered even until today. And so they said any land that was not registered under the 1925 Land Settlement and Registration Ordinance was deemed to belong to the government of Sudan. Now, the unregistered land effectively aimed to dispose communities actually. Now, this is the intention of their own land. And given that they were not registered with the central registry in Khartoum, surely land in my village would just simply technically belong. This was also challenged by especially the majority of Sudanese, and it did not take effect. And then came the National Islamic Front government of Omar al-Bashir. In 1998, they enacted a very interesting Land Act. I think this is now enactment because there was a functional government and parliament at that time, as opposed to the colonial time. So in 1998, the NIF enacted the law, land law, whatever they called it. And this, the summary of this document says that clear all land in the Sudan to belong to Allah or to God, and giving the Islamic State as the representative of Allah on earth the power to dispose of land owned by non-Muslims. And again, of course, now this was happening in 1998 when we were at war, and this did not take effect seriously throughout the country. Now we came to this era of the CPA negotiations, and the issue of land was there as well as part of the chapter 3 of the wealth sharing protocol of the CPA. Now this protocol, and Manon talked about it, when people discussed this protocol, the FPLM or the people of South Sudan who were involved in this conversation, led by the SPLM, were deeply concerned about the issue of land ownership. And they did not want this to be deeply discussed, especially given this historical context. And so they actually technically dodged this conversation, but first of all, put in what I would call guarantees for the issue of land ownership and resolution of land disputes in the respective governments, subnational governments and the national government. So technically, the land issue was not precisely addressed by the CPA. And so what they said in the CPA chapter 3 of the wealth sharing protocol was that if you take time, you might read this chapter 2, article 2.1 says, without prejudice to the position of the parties in the CPA negotiations, with respect to ownership of land and subterranean natural resources, including in Southern Sudan, this agreement, the CPA, in other words, is not intended to address the ownership of those resources, which means land resources and all other subterranean natural resources. The parties agreed to establish a process to resolve this issue. So they did not take ownership. But they went on to say, of course, to agree to establish commissions both in the South and also in the national government to address this issue. But they recognized the rights of people who are enjoying, those who are using land, that they reserved those rights. And basically, that means the individuals and communities reserved those rights. And if there were issues, they would be addressed by respective governments wherever those issues occurred. So technically, that was it. And immediately after the CPA, another legal document that spoke to the land issue was the interim constitutions of the Sudan and also the interim constitution of Southern Sudan. And so Article 180 of the interim constitution of Southern Sudan, Section 1 says, the regulation of land tenure, usage, and exercise of rights thereon shall be a concurrent competence exercised at the appropriate level of government in Southern Sudan. That means it provided or entrusted this responsibility of addressing the issue of land tenure to either the national government or the state government or the local government as appropriate. And Article 180, 2 of that law, in the interim constitution of Southern Sudan, also say rights in land owned by the government of Southern Sudan shall be exercised through the appropriate or designed level. Anyway, those were provisions of the Act. And they also recognized the issue of customary land use and communal rights of communities to that effect. Not to spend more time in the details of this, the Land Act was then enacted, the first Land Act for Southern Sudan. It was enacted in 2009, so it is the 2009 Land Act, which spoke quite specifically in terms of land ownership, in my view. The other documents and the legal provisions all along from the pre-colonial time to 2005, especially now these ones of the CPA and the interim constitutions, recognized the use of land as they were and acknowledged that there were issues that could be dealt with at appropriate levels of government. So the Land Act, in my view, was the first document to vest ownership of land. And so in Article 7.1 of the National Land Act, the current Land Act, not the recent land bill, which says, the 2009 Land Act says, all land in Southern Sudan is owned by the people of Southern Sudan, and its usage shall be regulated by the government. And went on to say, Section 2 of Article 7, that land may be acquired, held, and transacted through the following tenure system: customary, freehold, and leasehold. And finally, Article 9 says all land in Southern Sudan shall be classified as public, community, or private land. This was what the 2009 Land Act says. Now, then we transitioned to independence through the national transitional constitution of the Republic of South Sudan 2011, as you may be aware of, and I think Manon quoted that. Now, these adopted the provisions of land ownership from the Land Act 2009 Land Act. And as the law provides, the Land Act still remains in force until another law, which is the new Land Act, is enacted also. And so it borrowed this provision and says in Article 170 that all land in South Sudan is owned by the people of South Sudan, and its usage shall be regulated by the government in accordance with the provisions of this constitution and the law. And went on to say, Article 171(2), that land tenure system shall consist of public land, community land, and private land. And now, the last bit of a legal document on the land issue is this draft national land policy of 2023, which is still under development. Now, what does it say? It also borrowed almost exactly the language of the 2009 Land Act and also the 2011 Transitional Constitution, which says in Article 3.2, talking about land sovereignty, that all lands in South Sudan is owned by the people of South Sudan collectively as a nation, as communities, and as individuals. And it went on, goes on to say, all lands in South Sudan is designated as public, community, or private, and the usage of all lands is regulated by the state in accordance with the law and the constitution. Interestingly, I think this is one thing that appears totally new to me in this, but kind of a reshaping or rewording of the provisions of the CPA, the 2009 Land Act, and also the Constitution. It says the state authority, which is the second tier of the government, shall manage and administer the land in accordance with the law and regulations. In my view, this land bill now tends to vest the authority on the issues of management of land in the state governments. That means the state governments are, by this law, empowered to take charge of what they call management and administration of land in accordance with the law. So it is now made as concurrent responsibility, but it is specifically vested in the state. That means this issue of regulation of land usage is now clearly vested in the state governments. Now it goes on to also say the land tenure shall be perpetually owned or rationalized into land leases as regulated by the law and usage. So that, in my view, technically, of course, it is not personal pronouncement that declares the land of South Sudan to be owned by anyone. The law as it stands now, in all of its provisions, as you can see from the current Land Act, which is the 2009 Southern Sudan Land Act, which remains in force by legal provisions, and Mayen might attest to this, that if you have a law, it remains in force until it is repealed by another law. So that law and the 2011 Constitution, which again remains in force, yeah, I think these are the two laws that are in force today, vest the ownership of land in the people of South Sudan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Isaac, give people a chance. So the next one is who's us? Mayen, DengDit.
Thank you, Mr.
Mayen. Ayok is around. It would be better to allow Ayok, and then Mayen will be the last because to address the legal issue on this.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, he's not here.
Oh, then we can go there. It's fine. You can go, Moran, man.
Okay. Rajab, you want to sit?
No. Sorry, my phone, my mic is open.
How about brothers? If there was a suggestion that Mayen should go later, so that he had.
Yeah. You are here, Sabata. You can go, Sabata. We want Molan Mayen to take notes and conclude a comment later on for what we talk about it now. Yeah, you can take that, Sabata.
Okay. Really, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you very much for giving me the opportunity, and thank you, Maulana Mayen, for allowing me to go on your place so that you will finalize things later. The question here is, who owns the land of South Sudan?
It's a very, very broad question. Fellow brothers and sisters, we know that the social composition of the South Sudanese people are people who are indigenous owners of their lands. This is there, even though it is not expressed in the constitution of the country that these people are indigenous owners of their lands. They are indigenous owners of their lands. Just like when you the society in Uganda, for example, Kampala is a geopolitical demographic. It is a district, but it belongs to the Baganda. Nobody questions that. If you go to Gulu, it belongs to the Acholi. Nobody questions that. If you go to Nebi, it belongs to the Alu. Nobody questions that. Likewise, if you go to Kenya, when you go to Nairobi, that territory belongs to the Kikuyu. Nobody questions that. Karamoja or Karamajong have their own place. The Maasai and all that. In Africa, the societies are like this. And during establishment of what is called a state, when states now form these nations so that people have state nations, the states design what is called policies that give people rights. So I think as South Sudanese, it will be fair for us to talk about our rights as citizens of South Sudanese individually. Does the country give us individually rights to be wherever in Sudan, in South Sudan? This is something we can talk. But that should not be confused with who owns what property. Just like in the countries that I've just given examples, Uganda, Kenya, if you are a Uganda, you have the right to establish yourself wherever. You could be a Mnyankole, and you can even decide to go and establish yourself in Koboko, which is an indigenous place of the Kakwa people, because you are a citizen. You can be a Kakwa and you can go and live in Barara, or you can come and live in Kampala, an area of the Waganda, because you are a citizen. So when we talk of the rights that are given to us as people, as citizens, yes, but that should not be mistakenly taken as though if South Sudan gives people or its citizens the right to settle anywhere, this is common with all the countries like that, especially if you're a member of the UN General Assembly, because Title 12 actually provides the rights for movement and the rights for people to be wherever they want to be amongst the members of the UN General Assembly. And that gets enforced through the state departments or Hakumat governments. That is why in South Sudan, in the constitution, there is a right given to each citizen to establish himself or herself wherever he or she wants inside the territory of South Sudan. But that does not mean that today I am a Kakwa. If I decide to go and establish myself in Bibor, for example, or in Bahar al-Ghazal, this is because I choose to do that and I get to have the right to be there by virtue of what the Constitution gives me. But that does not mean I will go and claim ownership of Bahar al-Ghazal, for example. What I can do is, if I own a property through a process, then that property becomes my private property. And I will own it through a process. Now, the context in which this question is being asked, who owns the land of South Sudan? That's why I started by saying it's too broad, too broad. Anybody in South Sudan can decide to go and own a piece of a land through a process anywhere. But the truth will remain that when we talk of the tribes in South Sudan, those tribes have what is called indigenous territories that historically belong to them, and I'm not aware that those territories are being now deprived of those, the ownership of those territories are deprived from those communities through a process of the constitution. I'm not aware of that. What I'm aware of is now that South Sudan is a country, it tries to establish right to the people, and it fairly says the land belongs to the people. That statement is broad, it makes sense, but does not negate the fact also that these people have indigenous territories that belong to them. I will leave it here so far, and I want to thank you very much for giving me the opportunity, and I will start to drive in a minute until Badin Kaman Kanana Ligo Fursa Betai, Alana be closing statement, then I will do. God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Manon. I mean, Madid, I wanted to, there's a point that I just want to add it up and proceed, if you allow me. Just one point that I forgot, and it's important for me to bring it at this point.
Yeah, go
I think you can take a minute, no problem. Or 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. What I want to strongly emphasize here is that the provisions of the law should be read in totality, but not in isolation. And that regards the provision of the law in the Constitution, let's take the Constitution, and also the current Land Act, provides two clear definitions on the issue of ownership of land. Article 171 says all land in South Sudan is owned by the people of South Sudan, and its usage shall be regulated by the government in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution and the law. This must at all times be read together with Article 171, which speaks to what Sabata is saying, that Part 2 says land tenure system shall consist of public land, community land, and private land. That means the plot I own, that my father bought before I was born and now I own, that is totally private. And that whatever the land ownership by the people says doesn't deprive me of these rights. Two, the land that my community owns in my village in Mariti, our land as recognized by the law. And so when we read these provisions of the law, and maybe the lawyers would speak to that, we don't read them in isolation. Read one, but not the rest. Always, this provision of land ownership should be read together. Land is owned by the people, and then land tenure system, exactly as Sabata was describing, is public, community, and private. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Isaac, are you there? Okay.
Yes, Abraham.
Yeah, take over. Give people a shot.
Okay, who is next? I'm a bit occupied here. I was not paying much attention.
I think if there are no other keys, no the speaker, then we can go to Molana Mayen. And then we'll go to the rest of our comrades who are joining us now, locally.
All right, then. Thank you. Thank you so much. Mulana Mayen,
Okay, thank you. Thank you also to the previous speakers who have actually covered much of what I was going to contribute. Of course, Brother Rajab Mohandis has taken us down memory land on the issue of the colonial land ordinances, the 1906 land ordinance, the 1925, 1928, and then, of course, the 1970, the Unregistered Land Act, and again, coming up to the Land Act of the National Islamic Front, which was mostly a political act rather than based on recognized legal principles of land ownership and land tenure. Again, I agree that the law must be always read in totality, because if you isolate one article of the law and you now discuss it without looking at all the other complementary articles that would create a totality of the law, then you create a lot of controversy, and which is the case right now with the Land Act and the draft national land policy that was just recently passed and is being discussed both by the government and by all the people of South Sudan, citizens, and especially through the social media. Of course, land is an emotive issue. Land, ownership of land, and land gives identity. Without land, you don't have identity. In fact, most of the wars in the world have been fought over land and land ownership. And patriotism is also related to land. So land definitely is a factor of one of the factors of production. We know the factors of production: land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Capital can be found anywhere. Labor is so long as we have human beings, we are laborers. Whether you are educated or not educated, you are a laborer, and you labor to survive. Entrepreneurship is something that could be taught in school, but it is a natural tendency in human beings to seek for better life and use production to gain capital and improve their life. But land, without all the other ones, land is the most important factor of production, because land produces, you produce agriculture on land, and you live, you build your house on land, you build your office on land, everything is done on land. That is why communities, when they are negotiating ownership of land, they tend to be maximalist. They want to take the most out of what is being discussed, which is a natural tendency. The second thing Paul have talked about, the general principles that must be read in totality. Looking at chapter 2 of the land of the Land Act, which is land ownership. It talks of the regulation of land tenure, usage and exercise of rights thereon shall be concurrent competencies. Rather, Rajab talked about all the levels of the state, like state authorities going to county, going to Ayam, and so it's always best practice that those institutions that are closer to the land should have some land management competencies. Rights in land owned by the government of South Sudan shall be exercised through the appropriate or designated level of government in South Sudan, which shall recognize customary land rights under customary law or customary land law. So the Land Act also recognizes these levels of government. When we talk of customary law, we are not talking about only chiefs doing it. We have Payam administrators are the ones that will, going back even to Buma, they are formed because they are closer to the people. Going back to Brother Sabah, he's talking about social composition and indigenous ownership of land. Well, and he and many people that have raised their voices of late said that this law is not expressed. This ownership is not expressed in the Constitution. Whereas the truth is that the ownership is expressed in the Constitution. We talk about Article 170 of the Constitution of land ownership. And it's also, when we look at the abstract of the of Land Act, it says that rights in land under customary tenure shall be an assured security of occupancy. So if you have occupied that land for as long as you remember, then it is under this law. Then this it's an assured security of occupancy. Your occupancy is secured, is assured, irrespective of whether or not their interest is held individually or in association with others. Whether it's your own house in your village or a land that you all own as the village at large. And it says that also customary land shall be demarcated. You know, demarcation of customary land has not been the case in most African states, but it is best practice that this ownership of the villages, when we talk about customary, let us imagine the village. So the ownership of the village must be demarcated and registered. So it's not only going to be customary tenure, but it's also going to be legal tenure in terms of demarcation and registration in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution and the Act itself. Generally, to answer the question, it's the general principles of land ownership, not only in South Sudan or in other African countries, worldwide. We have these three classifications. They are always, you just download any land act or go through any land act in the world. You have public land, you have community land, you have private land. Community land, in particular in the African context, community land is always there because land is communally owned, unlike the United States, for example, where only the indigenous Indians have reservations. These are their community lands. Otherwise, the rest are either private or federal land. And federal land is bigger than private land. This is a different context altogether. But given the fact that the debate of late has been around one aspect of the law, that land belongs to the people. The people include communities, include, include villages. Villages are constituent units of the people. And the law, the Constitution, and the Land Act recognizes this fact. Generally, when you have a central government, you have a Ministry of Land and Physical Infrastructure, you have the Ministry of Environment, you have the Ministry of Animal Resources, you have the Ministry of Mining. All these ministries are replicated at state levels, of course. But when you have these ministries, it means that they have some certain rights of land management. It means that there must be some classification of public land, or it means that they are also going to work on making sure that there is no encroachment of one community into another community land. This has not been the case, of course, in South Sudan. But
I cannot drop back. I cannot stick drop ban.
If
Yeah.
there is a history if we can trace back chronologically the land acts from the colonialists to independent South Sudan, we could also trace the movement of the people of South Sudan and the reason why the people of South Sudan have moved from one region to another. Definitely, the liberation struggle is one factor. Without the liberation struggle, if the people of South Sudan had not taken arms, had not engaged in a war of independence against the central government in Khartoum, there would be no movement of people around South Sudan. If, for example, the 1991 problems in Ethiopia did not happen, then the people that were refugees around would not have been forced to come back to South Sudan and spread all over, including in areas that were not traditionally their own land, and they have been there for a while. If there was no CPA, there would be no repatriation of the people of South Sudan from the region, from the refugee camps, back to South Sudan. If the government had put in place amenities in regions, different regions, in the 3 regions in the ancestral lands of our people, then that would have facilitated their repatriation to their areas. But since there was no way for our people to get back to their ancestral lands, some people had to move to other people's lands, especially in Equatoria, which is bringing a big issue. The last thing is that if the government did not discuss this issue thoroughly, if it is bulldozed in parliament, if civil society is not engaged, if the people of South Sudan on the ground are not assured that there is no sinister motive behind the idea that land belongs to the people. If that did not happen, I hope it happens. If that does not happen, then we are in for serious land conflicts in the country, which we can avoid by engaging all levels of our people in this debate, so that they get assured that the provisions of the law, the fact that there is an assurance of occupancy of traditional societies, of indigenous groups in South Sudan. If that is not highlighted to the people of South Sudan, they will always look at this aspect, this one aspect of that land belongs to the people, and completely forget to discuss or look at the other aspects that also community land and customary tenure is going to be protected by the law. So these are the things that as we move ahead, we need to be frank about. We need to be open about. The law is the law. I remember in 2009, I was the National Parliament. I was the director of the Department of Legislation, and that act, when the Constitution was the interim Constitution was to be amended and passed, this provision where that land belongs to the people was also controversial. And especially when it comes to our Equatorian brothers, citizens, who see that their land is being occupied by people from the other two regions. So the same thing, because there was no social media by then, it did not generate this level of controversy. But because there is social media, so many people can discuss at the same time. That is why the same provision of 2009, there is no change. That land belongs to the people. Did not change, neither in the Constitution, the interim Constitution of 2011, nor in the Land Act of 2009. The same provisions have been there, and they were enacted then. They brought controversy, but it died down. Now that it has been resurfaced, we need to discuss that as citizens of one country who want peace in our country, who want to see that our people occupy different parts of South Sudan because we have enough land everywhere. I think I've...
you ended...
yes,
thank
yes,
you.
Within my time limit, so that we continue discussing this thing.
Yes, thank you so much. Your input actually is very comprehensive in terms of legality, and I do agree with you 100% that actually it's just a misunderstanding of reading documents. If you read it carefully, you will find actually there's no difference. Rather, they want to improve the effective way of managing it and effective way of regulating it. And I think that's where the reason now they have other acts that are actually going to follow, like Community Land Act is going to detail it out clearly. Is another document that they're going to work on it, and the Public Land Acts and the Land Registration Acts and Land Commission Acts, Physical Land Planning Acts and Land Survey Act and climate and all these things. So the benefit here is to develop the land in the way that will benefit the whole South Sudanese and more manageable, more effectively, so people can benefit from it. Your question in terms of whether they draw from the grassroots and stakeholders, in this draft, I think in chapter 2, they talk about the technical task force that convene and facilitate multi-stakeholders retreat in WOW. Between April 25th to May 23, 2022, where they're deliberating on the current context of the land governing in South Sudan and review the 2019 draft, of national land plans on the basis of restriction. And I think they did that workshop, and they hold another workshop also in Juba between September 6th to September 8th, 2022, attended by the major land sector actors from the national and state governments and international agencies and partners, developmental partners, UN agencies, private sectors, and academic traditional shifts and civil society. So one of the important also, which government need to take it seriously, as you put it, is the dissemination of document itself, and conducted the several workshops so people can understand it and own it. And this is one of my personal belief that the only document that were able to disseminate it clearly and explain it clearly was only CPA. The rest of document, no one actually want to disseminate them and put effort on it so the people can own it. Because if people understand it, then there will be no confusion on those land laws. So I do agree with you, Moulana Mayen, and let us move the line. If there's no one from the speakers want to add anything.
Our last speaker is here. Then Ayok is here.
Okay. Well, Ayok is here. Okay, then Ayok can pick it from there. Thank you. Fudul Ustaz Ayok, the floor is for you.
All right, DengDit Ayok, I think he's far away from his phone. Let's move the line while we're waiting for him. Galactics and Friday.
No, he's open.
He's open. Okay, DengDit Ayok has opened his line.
Greetings to all of you once again. I would like to apologize because I was here and then I received a call and it was kind of a long one. So I was away and I believe a lot has been said in my absence. But it was important for me to be here to listen to others so that I don't repeat some point which have already been said. I would be very brief with regard to the questions: who owns the land of South Sudan? Or if I may rephrase the questions, we can say to whom the land belongs to in South Sudan. You know, when you are talking about the land of South Sudan, it means you are talking about a country. It means you are talking about the people of that country. But at the same time, the question is a legal question. It's about owning the land, to whom the land belongs to, based on legal documents that we have in the country, and also based on the history of the communities, the South Sudanese communities that are occupying the land that is referred to as South Sudan. If you go constitutionally, I would concur with Brother Manon, who spoke earlier, quoting Article 170, Section 1 in the Constitution, the 2011 Constitution. It clearly says that all land in South Sudan is owned by the people of South Sudan, and that the usage of that land is regulated by the government in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution and the law. So this is like part of the answer to the questions to whom the land belongs to in South Sudan. The land equally belongs to the people of South Sudan. And in my opinion, as a person, I like the fact that the land we have in South Sudan belongs equally to all of us as the people of South Sudan. But then when you go into the details in the legal documents that we have, whether it is the Constitution or the Land Act 2009, you will find that land is categorized into three, and you are all aware of the three categories. And each category is defined and well explained. And when you go to the CPA that was signed in 2005 in Nairobi, the SPLM came up with the principle of land belonging to the community. And in the writing of Mansour Khalid, the late Mansour Khalid, he gave us the background as to why the SPLM came up with the principles of land belonging to the people.
And it is very much connected to the issues or to the laws of land in the old Sudan. In the old Sudan, especially under the Islamist government of Omar al-Bashir and Hassan al-Turabi, lands belongs to God, and it is run by the government, because in their system they believe that Allah is the most supreme being who owns everything, and that human beings who are here on earth are a representative of God. And so the SPLM came up with the idea of land belonging to the communities in order to counterattack the Islamic narrative of lands belonging to God, and that the government is only there to regulate it, or the government is there as a representative of God on earth. So those kind of laws in the old Sudan were not fair to the Sudanese people. And so for the SPLA to protect the rights of the people of South Sudan in land ownership, they came up with the principle of land belonging to the community, and that's why it was enshrined in the CPA that the lands belongs to the community, and it was later on incorporated into the Constitution of Sudan 2005 until 2011, the time when South Sudan seceded from Sudan and became an independent country of its own. And so, this is it. I'm aware that land has become a critical issue in South Sudan, because there is a crisis in South Sudan. Some people call this land grabbing. Some people feel that the word grabbing is not suitable, so they refer to it as land crisis. Instead of using the word land grabbing, they would prefer to say land crisis. Whether it is land grabbing or land crisis, in fact, there is a problem with regard to the issue of land in South Sudan, and we all agree to this fact. Where does the problem arise? Our government is not regulating the land the way it should. And so you can see that there is a rivalry between the government and the communities. You can see that there is a high competition between government and communities over issues to do with land. The community will say these lands belongs to us, and they would rush to quote the Constitution to justify their claim. And the government would say, no, the lands belong to the community, but I have a right of regulating it. So they all quote the same Constitution. Recently, in the Council of Ministers, the government sat down by the end of last month, which was October. They sat down and they made some amendments on laws to do with land. And then the government spokesperson was publicly heard talking in the media, saying that land does not belong to the communities, but land belongs to the people of South Sudan. And there were logical questions that were asked by the people who followed what the minister had said. South Sudan is a country. South Sudan is a people. If you look at these people are existing in form of communities. So if they own land as a people, then break them down into communities, they would still own the same land. So when you say people or communities, it's the same. So generally, land belongs to the people of South Sudan. And then it is categorized into 3 categories. And there are laws that regulate the acquisitions of land in the Republic of South Sudan, and people should follow all those laws. However, I understand that there is a controversy over those laws that were made or enacted by the parliament, and they are now laws that can be followed in the country. They are implementable laws right now in the country. So issues of land crisis are arising because there is no proper regulations of land. There are others who are taking lands of others. There are others who are encroaching into the lands of others. There are others who have their own cattle, rearing their cattle and then moving into the farms of others, destroy their crops. And so this one is bringing a lot of misunderstanding between the people of South Sudan. The issue of land also has got a very strong connection to some political rhetoric on some platforms that are here on social media. And when you listen to those platforms, they talk about land and they refer to the rights of the people and communities in land, which is right. But then they are stirring up fears of the citizens in the country that there are others who have plans to displace others, and then there are others who would like to make what they refer to as demographic change. And so this one can generate fears. It is stirring up fears of so many citizens in the country, and they would now begin to imagine that there are people who are targeting them and that their land is a target and so on. And this one is being done for political purposes. And we do understand that one. So regulating the land in the Republic of South Sudan needs a very strong government that uphold the rule of law and implement law fairly to the people of the Republic of South Sudan. This issue of selective implementations of our laws is not good, in my opinion, because it threatens the rights of others in the same land that belongs to all of us equally. Secondly, the regulation of land by the government is something quite controversial in my opinion. Why? Because if you have a government that is not honest enough, you would end up with that government selling the entire land of the Republic of South Sudan to the investors that are coming in to do their investment in the country. And that's why I said earlier that I'm happy with the idea that the land belongs to the people of South Sudan. And right now, we have a government that I believe is not responsible enough with regard to the issues of land. And so I have my own fears that if this government is not responsible enough with regard to the issues of land, it can cheaply sell our land to the investors. And in the long run, we can have problems with those investors who comes to our country with the aim of investing. And so if the government is really responsible, if the government is really loyal to the people of the country, it would properly regulate the land, and the land would still remain under the ownership of the people of South Sudan, and each investor would come and rent a land or put land under tenure of running and all those things, because these things are there. In Chapter 2 of Land Act 2009, which I have in front of me here, it's all about land ownership. And all these things are explained there. So, in a nutshell, land belongs to us, the people of South Sudan, but its regulation by the government is not proper, and this has caused a lot of problems between our people and communities, and it has brought mistrust. And the solution to this is that laws of South Sudan need to be applied, because we have lack of rule of law in the country. That's where we have the issue of land crisis not coming to an end very quickly. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Sir Deng. Thank you, Ayok. Input is perfect.